Hey guys, good afternoon. Uh, I think this is the last lecture before the final. We're going to finish female reproductive system, and next day you can review the system. So this is female reproductive system part C of the chapter 20. And today we will go over the organs of the female reproductive system. And you know the female reproductive system organs are the primary organ is the ovary. Uh, then other accessory organs of the female reproductive systems start from there. So it is fallopian tube, uterus, cervix, vagina, and then external genitalia. External genitalia is also called the vulva. So the main function of the female reproductive system is to produce egg and then to nourish the fertilized egg for 9 months inside the uterus and then nourish the baby after the baby is born. Okay. So to do that, the female reproductive system organ, the ovary, has monthly change. Every month there is cyclical change in the ovary to produce egg and to change in hormone production in the ovary. Okay. So here you go. Let's talk about the ovulation. And ovulation is the process of release of egg from the ovary. Ovulation is the result of the hormone. Okay. So pregnancy start with the hormone and ends with the hormone. Menstruation cycle start with the hormone and ends with the hormone. So we're going to talk about ovulation. What are the processes? What are the cell division change in the ovary? What are the hormones change during the month? So we're going to talk about from pituitary to ovary, how there is hormonal change. And we will talk about pituitary ovarian axis. Then due to the hormone from the ovary, there is every month the shedding of the inner lining of the uterus, that is called sloughing of the endometrium. And with that, there is loss of tissue as well as blood every month, and that is called menstruation cycle. So we will talk about cyclic change in the ovaries and cyclic change in the endometrium during the menstruation cycle. Okay. Uh, then endocrine control of the ovarian cycle. So we will go from the head, from the cortex of the brain up to the endocrine gland, how endocrine system is controlled by the cerebral cortex, and that is ovarian cycle, okay, axis. So here you have a female reproductive system organ. In the left side, you can see it is intact. All the supporting ligaments which holds the female reproductive organs intact in the pelvic cavity, whereas in the right side you can see all the supports are removed, and then there is some frontal section of the organ so you can see inside. Okay, so here you go. First let's talk about the organs and then I will come here. So I have this diagram. This is the mid sagittal section of the female reproductive organ. Are you guys oriented here? Let me check individual who are just part-time here. Some of you just turn on and don't pay attention. Okay. So what kind of section in this diagram you can see?
Mid-sagittal?
Mid-sagittal.
Mid sagittal section. That means you are dividing female body into right and left equal halves. And here you have half section of the right side of the body. And you are looking from the left side towards the right half of the body, medial body. Okay. So this is posterior. This is anterior. Let's go by the organs. Primary organ is the ovary. Ovary is attached to the uterus through a ligament. You see this ligament? That is called ovarian ligament. So that holds the ovary to the uterus. Then there is the fimbriae of the uterine tube, which in this diagram looks like it is attached anatomically to the ovary, but in real life they are not. These fimbria are away from the ovary. There is a space between there is blank space between these two. Fimbria is attached to the uterine tube. So when egg release, this fimbria contract and creates a wave that suck the egg inside the infundibulum of the fallopian tube, and then it brings to the uterine tube. Then uterine tube joins the uterus, you can see here. From in this diagram, you can see only right uterine tube is opening into the uterus. Left uterine tube and left half of the uterus is removed. Okay, and you can see the ureter here. Now uterus is the largest female organ here, which is made up of connective tissue, but mainly the smooth muscle and epithelial tissue inside. The uterus is sandwiched between the bladder and the rectum posteriorly, you can see. From the rectum, here, anterior to the rectum, the uterus, the lower end of the uterus is the fornix. Fornix. The gap here, this is called fornix. And this part, the lower lip-like part, is called cervix of the uterus. And you see there is opening in the cervix that is called cervical canal. Then cervix is continuous with the shack of the smooth muscle and the the stratified squamous epithelium that is called vagina, birth canal. These all are the internal organs of the reproductive system. Okay. Now from there is the vulva region of the or external genitalia of the female reproductive system. So external genitalia is the inner leaf of the vagina, sorry, the vaginal opening that is called labium minor or labia minor, plural. Labia minor has the stratified squamous epithelium, but non-keratinized, without hair. Labia majora is continuation of the skin and it has hair. The anterior end of the labia minora. So if you see, this is right labia minora, left labia minora. They are fused anteriorly and attached to a crux of erectile tissue, which are made up of corpus the cavernosus. Do you remember corpus cavernosus? So these tissues are similar to corpus spongiosum and corpus cavernosus. Okay, that means they have erectile tissue. It has also a lot of blood vessels. So as penis erect during the excitation phase of the sexual intercourse. This clitoris also engorges with blood vessels and erect during the sexual intercourse because they are homologous structure. Okay. The fat anterior to the symphysis pubis, the bone or the cartilage, you see here, build of fat, that is called mons pubis, and there will be a lot of hair around the mons pubis. These all area outside the vagina, this all area is called vulva. Okay. So accessory sex organ consists of vagina, uterus, fallopian tube. Vaginal opening is just posterior to the urethra. So in female reproductive system, you see vaginal opening is just posterior to the urethra and anterior to the anal opening. Both are covered by labia minora and labia majora. Erectile clitoris is at anterior margin of the labia minora. Okay. So let's go and see the uterus in detail from the frontal view of the female body. And I'm gonna explain a lot of terminology here, so you guys need to pay attention. First, let's talk about the structure of the female reproductive system. So this one is
The ovary.
ovary. This ligament is ovarian ligament. This one is fimbria. This one is infundibulum here. So fimbria is the finger-like projection of the fallopian tube, and those are attached to the infundibulum here, which is like funnel shape. And then dilated part of the fallopian tube is called ampulla, ampulla of uterine tube, or ampulla of fallopian tube. Then fallopian tube continuous here. You have removed anterior part of the fallopian tube. So you see the duct lumen of the fallopian tube. This is the most constricted region of the fallopian tube, and this is called isthmus, isthmus, isthmus of the fallopian tube. And then we have uterus. Some of the ligaments which holds this fallopian tube, ovary, and uterus together. Let's see in the right side. What are those ligaments? So this broad ligament is the double layer of peritoneum, which is holding everything pretty much. The fallopian tube, the ovary, the uterus, the blood vessel, everything. And they attach the uterus to the lateral side of the pelvic cavity. Inside the broad ligament, you have a round ligament. This round ligament is coming from the uterus. This is the round ligament here. It's cut inside. Round ligament, and this is ovarian ligament. So round ligament is continuation from the uterus to the anterior wall of the abdomen, and it holds your uterus anteriorly. Then ovarian ligament holds ovary to the uterus. Then there is uterosacral ligament, which you cannot see in this diagram, which connects uterus to the sacrum, and that's how uterus is held posteriorly to the sacrum of your vertebra, so that uterus is not falling down, because uterus is the size of your pear fruit, that size, and if it is not held completely, it can fall easily downwards. That's why it is all the protection. There is another ligament which is connecting the ovary, this area. These connective tissue is called mesoovarian. Then there is suspensory ligament of the ovary. Ovary is suspended to the lateral side through the suspensory ligament. Okay, so these are the ligaments which supports the uterus in the pelvic cavity. You can see these all ovary, uterus. They have a lot of blood vessel. You can see uterine artery is coming, uterine vein is coming. There is some ovarian artery and ovarian veins. So ovarian artery is direct branch of abdominal aorta, whereas uterine artery is the branch of internal iliac artery, which is also called pudendal artery. Okay, and you can see these arteries and veins are becoming capillaries which supply these organs. Now let's talk about the uterus. Uterus has dome shaped in the superior, that is called fundus of the uterus. And then the main middle region of the uterus is body of the uterus. And then it has lower part that is called the cervix. The vagina goes up and then make a pouch around the cervix. And that pouch of the vagina is called fornix of the vagina. If you imagine the 3D structure of the vagina, let's see if this is the vaginal opening. So if, look at my hand. If vagina, this is the vagina, my hand, both hands vagina opening, they're making pouch on the lateral, right side, left side, they are making the pouch. So this is right and left fornix made by the vagina over the cervix. And same way there will be anterior and posterior. So there are how many fornices? 4. 2 lateral, right and left, and 2 anterior and posterior. This is called fornix of the vagina, 1. And if they are more, then we call them fornices. These fornices are important for gynecological examination. So when you try to find out any abnormality in the pelvic organ, then you put the finger in the vagina, and from there you put your finger inside the fornices and you can palpate any mass, any tumor from there. Or you can diagnose even PID, pelvic inflammatory disease. Okay, so that is the fornix. And then you see vagina. Vagina is made up of a lot of connective tissue and then smooth muscle and the stratified squamous epithelium with a lot of folding of the epithelium and submucosa, this sac. Now let's see the histology of the uterus. The outermost layer, which is the white thin layer, outer white thin layer is called peri, means outside, metrium means uterus. Middle, the thickest layer, the pinkish layer is called myometrium, which is made up of smooth muscles. An inner epithelial layer is called endometrium. Endometrium has 2 layers. We're going to see that later. The functional layer and the basal layer. Okay. Basal layer is inner layer of the endometrium, and functional layer is the, how we say, functional layer is the layer towards the lumen of the uterus cavity, uterine cavity. This is functional layer, which is lost every month. Okay, so this is pretty much the anatomy of the female reproductive structure inside. And I'm going to go over some of the terminology here. Okay, so you see, what is this structure? When egg is released on day 14 of menstruation cycle, if your menstruation cycle is regular for last 6 months, then you hope to release your egg on day 14th. If it is not, then it may be before or later. Okay. So when this egg is released, that process is called
Ovulation.
ovulation. Okay. Once this egg released, you see here, the fimbriae of the fallopian tube contracts. And when they contract, they create in this area, this egg, and there is some mucus, there is some fluid. They create a wave of the fluid. And through that negative wave, they pull the egg through the fimbria. They have cilia. So the cilia create the wave and they suck inside the egg and then bring into the infundibulum. Okay. From the infundibulum, it comes here in the ampulla, the dilated region of the enlarged region of the fallopian tube. From the release, by the time it reaches here, if there is sexual intercourse and if there is release of sperm, provided the sperm is viable and can swim, then sperm swim from here. Millions of sperm swim from here, from the vagina. And a lot of them die inside the vagina, some of them in the cervix, some of them in the uterus, and some smart ones can climb all the way, swim up to the ampulla, like in millions, a lot, thousands, hundreds of thousands each year. And among them, only one, after capacitation, enter this egg. When this sperm and egg fuse together, that process is called
Fertilization.
okay.
Fertilization.
So fertilization occurs in the ampulla of the fallopian tube, and that is called fertilization, fusion of egg and sperm. Now it takes almost 4 to 5 days from after fertilization, 5 to 6 days. So this fallopian tube has the smooth muscle in the wall. So they contract and cilia beat, and then cilia propel them slowly in the tube. Sometimes they stay there. And if they stay here in the tube, or sometimes this egg remain here in the pelvic cavity. And some of the sperms are so smart, they can reach up to here and fertilize the egg. So either this is here or anywhere except the uterus. And if they are fertilized egg and start growing there, we call them what?
Ectopic pregnancy.
Ectopic.
Ectopic pregnancy. Very good. Now, if they are fertilized here and moving, then it comes inside. And on the way, this fertilized egg is already immediately after fertilization. What happens? They
Cell
start
division.
multiplication by mitosis, and they forms the morula, and then morula comes here, zygote, and then they come here and implant on the uterus. Okay. When they implant and buried inside this endometrium, what is that condition called?
Conception.
Conception. Yes. So implantation is conception. Good. After the conception, the outer cell of the growing embryo becomes the gland, and that gland is called the trophoblastic cells. Those trophoblastic cells start producing a hormone called beta HCG, human chorionic gonadotrophin hormone. That hormone come by near this blood vessel and then go to this wall inside the ovary. So when egg release, some of the cells of the covering of the egg remain here. And this beta HCG ask this corpus luteum to produce the progesterone continuously to continue the pregnancy. Okay?
Professor, you said the corpus luteum, is that, when that forms, is that in the endometrium or is that higher?
Corpus luteum are here in the ovary.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, some other terminology here. So now fibroids. So where you have endometrium, endometrium is inner lining here, yes? And then myometrium is in the middle layer. If myometrium are made up of smooth cells, so if there is tumor of the smooth muscle cell, then we call it fibroids. So fibroids are benign tumor of the myometrium, that is called leiomyoma. And those are like bumps, hard bumps inside the uterus, and you can feel on the surface. So if you do ultrasonogram or doctor examine this, you can see there is like high density region inside the uterus wall, and they will be bleeding, they will disrupt fertilization, conception, irregular bleeding, pain. Those are the complication of the fibroids. uh, to prevent this egg to implant, you can tie the cut and tie, just sniff the cut the fallopian tube and tie, and that is called tubectomy. So that is cut and ligation of the fallopian tube. What is homologous to tubectomy in male?
Vasectomy.
Vasectomy, yes. Endometriosis is another terminology. You're gonna be, this is not in the note, but you're gonna be asked in exam. So endometriosis, which layer of the uterus is endometrium? Middle, outer, or inner?
Inner.
Inner. So this endometrial tissue is found only inside the inner layer of the uterus wall. And this is the only layer which has a lot of receptor, and they change during the menstruation cycle. This is the region, layer, some of the inner section, like the section towards the lumen of the endometrium, is sloughed out during menstruation due to change in hormone. So this layer is changeable, transitions with response to hormones. That means this kind of tissue, if you have anywhere in the body, let's say this endometrium is in your inside the myometrium, not here, but in the middle of the myometrium. Let's see, it is small tissue, microscopic tissue is here. Let's say it is here. This is the endometrium inside. What will happen? Every month when you bleed from here, you will bleed here too. Let's see, some tissue is here in the pelvic cavity, that will bleed too. In rare case, this tissue can be in axillary region, it can be inguinal region, it can be in anal region, it can be anywhere in the body. That is called endometriosis. So endometriosis is presence of endometrial tissue outside the endometrium. The most common side of the endometriosis is myometrium. Are you following me? So let's see this, every month it bleeds. And then this area is full of clot blood. I'm sorry, I went inside. It should not go inside. It remain here inside. Let me erase it, side one. Okay. So if this is inside, then what happens? Every month when you bleed, you slough out endometrium and you will also bleed here. But there is no way this bleeding to come out. So they start digesting the red blood cell and then release hemoglobin. So when blood becomes blood clot, blood cells, what happens? They becomes dark and they look like chocolate color when you dissect and release it. That's why endometriosis inside the Myometrium is sometimes called chocolate cyst. All the disease in human body characterized with the food, like chocolate cyst. Okay, so everybody got what is chocolate cyst? Chocolate cyst is a kind of endometriosis, which is inside the myometrium, which is the most common type of endometriosis. Blighted ovum. Okay, blighted ovum. So when this egg released, sometimes this egg is picked by infundibulum in the ampulla and they come here fast. Like this egg are viable for 72 hours almost. If there is no sexual intercourse or if there is no reach of a sperm to the egg, egg will die. But sometimes this egg run very fast and come here in implant of the uterus even before the fertilization or even without fertilization. So if egg is implanted in the uterus, unfertilized egg, for the uterus it is pregnancy. So uterus will start the trophoblastic cells, start will make beta HCG, start making progesterone from here, and then continue the pregnancy for time being. But what happens? By the 5th week of gestation, there should be heartbeat start, all the organogenesis. But you have not complete genetic code, so you will not develop anything. But what? If you have missed the period, in that time, if you do pregnancy test, you are pregnancy test positive. Are you following me? This time I'm talking a lot of thing in one slide. So you have to make note or watch this video again and make the notes. Okay. So if unfertilized egg implant in the uterus, then they give the impression of false pregnancy. That is called blighted ovum. So blighted ovum is implantation of unfertilized egg. Got it? So these are a lot of terminology I have talked about today, which is not in your slide, but in my notes. Okay. Okay, so production of oocytes. Can you imagine why? Let me talk about, last time we talked about the spermatogenesis. There was early spermatogenesis and late spermatogenesis. Late spermatogenesis was the, we use terminology, different terminology for late spermatogenesis. And the terminology was? Look into the note, guys.
Spermiogenesis?
Very good. Spermiogenesis. And everybody knows why a male can produce unlimited trillions of sperm. And here today we're going to see why female can produce only 400 eggs in her entire reproductive life. If you pay attention here, you're going to see. So compare and contrast, and every time, so at once, if you compare and contrast spermatogenesis with the oogenesis, then you will understand both of them. Okay. So here you go. Germ cell that migrate into ovaries from yolk sac. So when you are in the 5th month of gestation inside your mother's womb, when you were only 5-month old inside your mother's womb, that's the time you got these egg cells, primitive egg cells from your mother's placental yolk sac. You got some cells from there and you start developing eggs inside your ovary. Okay, so again, germ cell that migrate into ovaries from yolk sac multiply so that at 5 months gestation, ovaries contain 6 to 7 million oogonia. Okay, then what happens? That's the time you get 6 to 7 million production of oogonia, then ceases forever. No more oogonia. Okay, towards the end of gestation, that means 38th weeks of your mother's gestation, oogonia now is primary oocyte. Primary oocyte are diploid or haploid?
Haploid.
Haploid.
No, they are
Oh,
diploid.
yeah,
If,
they're diploid. Yeah, yes, they're
if
diploid. They
primary
have buds.
spermatocyte is diploid, then primary oocyte is also diploid. Okay. So towards the end of gestation, oogonia, now primary oocytes begin meiosis. So meiosis is like the haploid division, but they are overstayed in prophase of first meiosis. Okay. In that, from there, there is continual loss of primary oocyte throughout life. So you see, you start with 6 to 7 million, but you are losing from there every time. And how you lose? By the process of apoptosis. Apoptosis means self-causing death of the cells. Okay. Due to that apoptosis at birth, there are only 2 million left. So from 6, 7 million, you have at birth only 2 million left. Still, you are continuing losing the primary oocyte. At puberty, you have 400,000 left. And still, you are losing every month. By the whole reproductive age, you will release only 400 eggs on the ovulation day. Okay. So let's talk about ovarian cycle. These all are explained here. I'm going to go and talk about first here, and then I will come back. So if I talk about here, then you will understand. I will go back. Okay. So this is the diagram of the ovary. This is ovarian artery. This is ovarian vein. Ovarian artery is coming. So outside of the ovary is called cortex of the ovary. And inside of the ovary is called medulla of the ovary. Medulla of the ovary do not, medulla of the ovaries do not contain any oogonia. They contain connective tissue, areolar connective tissue, blood vessel, nerves, lymphatic vessels, other stuff. But cortex contains different stage of oocytes. Oocytes. Okay. So let's see here. I'm showing is only one cell and how they grow, but in this wall you will see like hundreds of other similar primary follicles. So you have a primary follicles. Primary follicles contains layers of cells, and this blue spermatogonia. Not spermatogonia. This is called oogonia or stem egg cells. Slowly these primary follicles with primary oocyte grow inside. So follicular cells grow in size, and that is called growing follicles. Further growth of the follicles and some of the follicular cells inside these follicles, these white cells, these growing primary follicular cells produce fluid, mucus. And those mucus are forms the small cavities filled, mucus filled small cavities. Okay. These cavities fill with fluid fuse together and makes large cavity that is called antrum. So you see, this is the follicular cells, the oogonia, and the antrum making full of the fluid, and that is called mature or Graafian follicles. These follicular cells also produce some enzymes. That enzymes, like the protease enzymes, these enzymes, they cut this outer layer and then cut here cumulus oophorus and release the egg. Once the egg release, that process is called ovulation. In the egg, what you see, there is once release like secondary oocyte. So here up to here, mature Graafian follicle and secondary follicles. So up to here you have 2N, but here you have N only. Sorry, this primary oocyte is 2N, and here this is N, secondary haploid. That means first meiosis now completes, okay, and second meiosis starts immediately. So outer cellular component of the secondary oocyte covering is called corona radiata, and then you have some zona pellucida cells and then secondary oocyte. Once this egg release, this go and implant in the uterus, and this cell outside the ovum, this becomes glands. They develop a receptor for the luteinizing hormone, because once this egg implant in the uterus, they produce beta HCG. Beta HCG activates anterior pituitary to produce a lot of LH. LH puts the receptor here and activates these cells to enlarge in size and makes progesterone hormone. Less estrogen and a lot of progesterone. This progesterone hormone then help to continue the pregnancy and help to implant this egg. Okay? But if there is no pregnancy, then what happens? If there is no sperm, this egg will not survive. 99.9% time, they will not survive. They will die. Then you don't need this corpus luteum. So there is no beta HCG, no LH, no progesterone, and then the ready uterus endometrial wall slaps, and that causes menstruation cycle. Okay, so let's go back now. So here you have oogonia, 46 chromosome. This is called primary oocyte in the cortex of the ovary. So where we are here in the cortex. If this were the sperm, what will happen? It will divide into two 46 chromosome cell, two daughter cell. One will move to the wall in the seminiferous tubule and one will come down and then makes two secondary cell, and then each will divide and make four of them, and that's why there will be four sperm. But in egg, what happens? You see here, in egg, there is division, first meiotic division, second meiotic division. So first meiotic division is completes now with the primary oocytes. Once it completes here, it forms the secondary oocytes. Do they form two? No. Only one side of the cells takes all the cytoplasm. Other daughter cell gets only nucleus and very little amount of cytoplasm and cannot sustain. That's why they becomes degenerative polar body. Secondary oocyte now released from the ovary in the ovulation and start the second meiotic division. So meiosis arrested, start that, but they are arrested in meiosis in the metaphase of the second meiosis. So second meiosis is not completed yet. It completes only when egg fertilize it. Are you following me? So now once ovulated, what happens? Then once the sperm fertilize it, then it completes second meiosis. But still again, what happens? Only one daughter cell gets nucleus half and most of the cytoplasm, and next half degenerates as polar body, second polar body. That's why you start from one, you make one maximum, and you are losing every month. That's why a female can release only 400 eggs in entire reproductive life. These are the same things here we talked about. So let's talk about now menstruation cycle. What is menstruation cycle? Menstruation cycle is approximately month-long cycle of ovarian activity seen in higher primates. So it is ovarian hormone that affect on the uterus and then change in the uterus and losing the endometrium is menstruation. Okay, so menstrual cycle is characterized by shedding of endometrial lining and bleeding. Okay, and in animal there is sexual receptivity throughout the cycle. In human there is not like this is the only time that's the sexual timing. In human, I think it is all. In some animals, this happens like seasonal, but in human, it is 12 month. Other animals have a stress cycle in which there is no shedding of endometrium and receptivity is limited. For example, dogs and cats. Okay. Okay. So here you go. So every month in the female, there is global change in the body. There is change in the brain hormones. There is change in the anterior pituitary hormone. There is change in the gonads, and then there is change in the uterus. So the main change is in the ovary, which causes the change in the uterus. And that's why that change in the uterus, we can divide them into 3 phases. And similarly, we can divide the endometrial change into 3 phases. So menstrual cycle in human is approximately 28 days. Day 1 is taken to be first day of menstruation. And in the ovary, there are 3 phases. So what are they? In the ovarian cycle, we have follicular phase, ovulation or luteal phase, ovulation phase, and the luteal phase. Okay, so follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and luteal phase. Whereas the hormone from the ovary brings the change in the endometrium, and those periods or phases are menstrual phase, proliferative phase, and secretory phase. Let's see what are those phases. I'm going to go and talk about these all phases in one slide, so you guys have, and you can go them all. Okay, look at this diagram and see what are the changes. So this is hormone from where? These 2 hormones, FSH and LH.
Anterior
Anterior
pituitary.
pituitary.
Yes, these are the gonadotropin secretion from anterior pituitary. So the FSH is green one and the LH is red one. And you can see this is menstruation cycle, which is covering the both follicular, the ovarian phase and the uterine phase. So this is anterior pituitary hormone. This is the change in the ovary. This is the ovarian hormone. The yellow one is estrogen hormone and green one is progesterone hormone. And then under the influence of estrogen and progesterone, you can see the change in the endometrium of the uterus. Okay, so if you remember, endometrium has two layers, the vagal layer and the functional layer. Okay, so sometimes we call zona viscalis and zona functionalis. So let's start from the brain. So here, the phase in the ovary, follicular phase from days 1 to days 13 or 14 is follicular phase. What happens in the follicular phase? Follicles in the ovary are growing under the influence of follicle stimulating hormone and some luteinizing hormone. But the dominant hormone is which one?
FSH.
FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. Okay. And then there is ovulation phase. Ovulation phase, which hormone is increased?
The LH.
Luteinizing hormone and some follicle stimulating hormone. At the same time, ovary is also producing hormone. So which hormone is producing during follicular phase from the ovary?
Estrogen.
Estrogen. So dominant hormone is estrogen. Estrogen from day 1 to day 13 is acting on the endometrium and it is increasing the thickness of the endometrium. You see here bleeding from the previous month and we have lost the endometrium. So now this estrogen hormone is acting on these cells and proliferating the glands, proliferating the blood vessels, proliferating the cells of the functional layer with the estrogen. At the same time, around 14th day of menstruation cycle, there is high luteinizing hormone, which is acting on these follicular cells, which are making more estrogen, and these estrogen are acting on the anterior pituitary, making more luteinizing hormone. So if one hormone is activating the release of another hormone, and they are doing vice versa, then what we call them, which feedback mechanism, positive or negative?
Positive.
So this is another example of positive feedback mechanism, and this continues till the egg is outside the follicle, ovulation. After the ovulation, this egg, if fertilized, needs the place to implant, to sit down, to live. That's why there should be preparation for that. Where they go? Egg, where will this egg will go? If fertilized.
Endometrium.
It goes into the
Endometrium here. So you need to prepare this because from here to come here, it takes like 6 to 7 days. For that day, what should we do? We should make it even thicker, spongy, more glands, more blood vessel, more thick. Okay. So in that line, this wall of the follicles, once this egg release, this corpus luteum start growing in the, and that phase is called luteal phase. And luteal phase, this corpus luteum then start producing progesterone. Progesterone makes the endometrium all change more blood vessels, more. Do you see the glands, white glands? They make a lot of mucus, spongy, so that the fertilized egg can come here and plant. And this phase is called secretory phase because secrete a lot of mucus, a lot of glands, a lot of blood vessel, a lot of cells thickness. This is called secretory phase and this is luteal phase. Now, not all the pregnancy continues. So what happens? Later, after 27 or 25 days, this corpus luteum will continue if there is luteinizing hormone. So if there is no luteinizing hormone, then what happens? You see, luteinizing hormone is dropping down. Once it drops down, this is start shrinking, and that becomes corpus albicans. That is the menstruation cycle change here. So this phase is called corpus luteum or luteal phase. And in uterus, this blood vessel, a straight blood vessel, start contracting, relaxation. When there is progesterone, they contracts, relax slowly. When there is no progesterone, they contract very fast. Contract and then relax. So all of a sudden there is like a lot of blood vessels, blood flow in these blood vessels. And then all of a sudden what happens? Constrict, and then they break these blood vessel and the tissue and all slough out, and that next menstruation cycle starts. That's how there is cyclical change in the ovary and in the uterine cycle during the menstruation cycle. And you can see all these here in this table. Whatever I have said, everything is explained step by step. Okay. Endocrine control of the ovarian cycle, we have gone over this in the endocrine system. So you see hypothalamus release gonadotrophin releasing hormone, and then all the way we have talked about this, so I'm not going to go again. Okay. Any question?
I have a question. So that contracting and relaxation, would that be what causes the abdominal pain when you're in the menstrual cycle?
That is, plus there is all prostaglandin and other hormones that cause your uterus contraction too. Like that time you have uterus contraction, fallopian contraction. And in those individuals, there is dysmenorrhea, we call them. Dys means painful, menorrhea means menstruation. So that is pretty much more contraction of the myometrium and the fallopian tube.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, guys.
Thanks,
Sir?
Dr. Shah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.